Root beer is a uniquely North American flavor, primarily made from the roots of the sassafras tree. Drinks made from sassafras roots were common with Native Americans before the arrival of Europeans, but actual root beer wasn't developed until around the 1800s. Pharmacist Charles Elmer Hyers commercialized root beer in 1875, and its popularity spread around the US. For some help making my root beer, I decided to travel up to the Canadian border of Minnesota to learn the secrets of the famous root beer lady, Dorothy Moulter. I'm here in Ely, Minnesota at the Dorothy Moulter Museum. So I've heard the legend, I've drank the root beer. Can you tell me more about the story?
I sure will. Dorothy Moulter root beer is very special, not just for the root beer itself, but for the story behind it. Dorothy Moulter was a registered nurse from Chicago who ended up running a wilderness fishing resort up in the heart of the Boundary Waters canoe area on the Isle of Pines of Knife Lake. And when President Truman issued an executive order banning float planes from landing in what we now know as the Boundary Waters canoe area, for a time Dorothy didn't have soda pop up at the resort. The resort is actually 15 miles from the nearest road. So she came up with the idea of brewing and selling her own brand of root beer using water straight from Knife Lake.
How was Dorothy able to get the sassafras this far north?
Well, actually, Dorothy didn't use sassafras. Sassafras doesn't grow in the Midwest. She used water straight out of Knife Lake, sugar, extract flavoring, and then a little bit of yeast. And of course, Knife Lake, if you were to travel the Boundary Waters canoe area, has some of the purest, clearest water. On a calm day, you can see 20 to 25 feet below the surface. And the cold, crystal clear waters were just perfect for making Dorothy's ice cold Isle of Pines root beer. So how did Dorothy make homemade root beer? It all started with taking 8 gallons of Knife Lake water. She would bring 4 gallons of that to a boil, add 6 pounds of sugar, add about 1.5 cups of root beer syrup, a couple bottles of root beer extract, and then she'd take a little cup of warm water with yeast in it to help activate the yeast. She would mix that in an 8-gallon crock with an additional 4 gallons of cold water. When that was all mixed up well, she would then ladle it individually into bottles of root beer, one at a time. Then she would cap it using an old-fashioned capper, and she could do that up to 11 to 12,000 times a summer. Can you imagine?
Thanks to that insight, I learned there might be a few extra stops on this trip to get everything. But first, collect some of Dorothy's secret ingredient, the pristine water from the Boundary Waters, with a little help from wilderness outfitters who hooked us up with a canoe. Dorothy's secret ingredient. Now I had Dorothy's secret ingredient for making her root beer, but I was a little skeptical of how much a difference the water would really make. So after first draining and boiling the water to sterilize it, I decided to do a blind taste test against Minneapolis tap water. Alright, so what I have here is 2 samples. I got water from the Boundary Waters and water from Minneapolis tap. So I'm going to do a blind taste test and see if one really tastes better than the other. I think it has some kind of extra flavor, so I think this is Boundary Waters water. If it is, it's pretty good. It might just be tap water. Yeah, this tastes a lot cleaner, or clearer, more pure. It's been filtered and everything, so I was right, this is Boundary Waters water. Yeah, I can taste like the wood and stuff that tends to float in the water. Kind of gives it the extra brown flavor. It almost gives it like an extra root beer flavor already to it. So, there might be some legitimacy to this.
Watch new episodes of How to Make Everything, Tuesday and Thursday, brought to you by Soylent. Because food doesn't have to be complicated.